I'm Michael Thompson, a 31-year-old office worker with a story to tell. A story of struggle, perseverance, and unexpected triumph. Growing up in a single-parent household, I watched my mom sacrifice everything to raise me. We lived in a small apartment complex, stark contrast to the upscale neighborhood just a few blocks away. That contrast became the source of my childhood and torment. Every day at school was a battle. The rich kids from the upscale neighborhood saw me as an easy target. They'd hide my shoes, throw my desk out of the classroom, and destroy the few possessions I had. "It's presumptuous for you to study in the classroom," they'd sneer. "Yeah, your poverty might be contagious," another would chime in, followed by cruel laughter. I can still remember the day they destroyed the pencil case my mom had bought with her hard-earned money. "Hey, look at this guy using such short pencils." They threw away the pencils I had carefully used until they were mere stubs, each one a small treasure I couldn't afford to replace. There were times I cried in the classroom, but no one ever lent me a helping hand. The teachers, seemingly unable to stand up to the wealthy parents, treated the bullying as if it didn't exist. It was frustrating and painful, but I didn't want to worry my mom. So every day, I pretended to go to school cheerfully, plastering a fake smile on my face that felt heavier with each passing day. "Have a good day at school, Michael," Mom would call out as I left our tiny apartment. "I will, Mom. See you later," I'd reply, my voice cheery even as my heart sank. To escape the torment, I spent my breaks holed up in the library, devouring books. The worlds within those pages became my refuge, a place where I could escape the harsh reality of my daily life. When I entered middle school, I foolishly thought things might change. Instead, the bullying escalated. The knowledge I had gained from countless hours in the elementary school library, I had unknowingly become better at studying than the rich kids. When I ranked in the top 10 in the first midterm exams, I stood out even more, becoming a target for students from other elementary schools as well. "Hey, don't walk in the middle of the hallway," a voice would shout before I felt a kick from behind, sending me sprawling onto the cold, hard floor. "Bathroom's the perfect place for you," another would sneer, before shoving me into a stall and locking the door. "Let me out! Let me out!" I'd cry, banging on the door until my fist hurt. All I'd hear in response was malicious laughter and taunting voices. "Get on your knees and beg. Maybe then we'll let you out." Such hellish moments kept passing, one after another, till they all blurred together into one long nightmare. There were no happy memories of school life. The handouts passed from the front were always torn, sometimes with blatant insults scrawled across them in messy handwriting. The teachers must have noticed, but just like elementary school, they turned a blind eye. I later learned that the ringleader's parent was a well-known wealthy loco, which explained the teacher's reluctance to intervene. Even with all this happening, I desperately continued going to middle school, not wanting to worry my mom, but it was getting harder to hide the evidence of the bullying. One evening, as I was doing homework at our small kitchen table, Mom's voice broke the silence. "Michael, isn't your uniform torn?" I froze. During PE class earlier that day, someone had taken scissors to my uniform while I was in the changing room. I'd hoped Mom wouldn't notice. I got it caught on a tree while exploring on the way home," I lied, my voice shaky. Mom's brow furrowed with concern. "Really?" "Yeah," I nodded, trying to sound more confident. "I have a sewing kit, so I can fix it myself." Looking back, I realized how unrealistic that lie was. But at the time, I was desperate to keep my mom from finding out about the bullying. She had enough to worry about without adding my school troubles to her plate. The one silver lining of middle school was that there was less bullying after school hours. As high school entrance exams loomed closer, even the rich kids started attending cram schools, leaving me in relative peace after the final bell rang. Of course, our single-parent household couldn't afford cram school, so I stayed in the library as usual. Immersing myself in studying helped me forget the unpleasant things, and it felt good to see results in my grades. Good grades meant I could go to a good high school and a good university. Graduating from a good university meant I could get a job at a good company. I thought the best thing I could do for my mom, who raised me single-handedly, was to pay her back when I became an adult. It became my driving force, pushing me to study harder and endure the daily torment. "Mom, I'll make sure you have a good life in the future," I remember saying one evening, my voice full of determination. Mom just laughed and ruffled my hair. "You're already giving me a good life, Michael. Just keep being you." Those words warmed my heart, even as I tried not to let her notice the pain I was hiding. Then, in my third year of middle school, something extraordinary happened. I ranked first in my grade and got into the top college preparatory high school in the area. It felt like a dream come true, a chance to escape the hellish environment I'd been trapped in for so long. High school was different. The bullying didn't stop entirely, but it lessened. Perhaps it was because I was no longer the only poor kid in school, or maybe it was because academic achievement was more valued in this environment. Whatever the reason, I found myself able to breathe a little easier. I continued to study hard, throwing myself into my books with the same fervor I had in middle school. But now, instead of using study as an escape, I found myself genuinely enjoying the process of learning. The world opened up to me through my textbooks, and I dreamed of the places that I'd go and the things I'd see once I got out of this town. My hard work paid off when I managed to get into a prestigious state university. It was a moment of triumph, not just for me, but for my mom as well. I'll never forget the look of pride on her face when I showed her my acceptance letter. "You did it, Michael," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You really did it." University life was a revelation. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who valued knowledge and hard work. The playing field felt more level here, where your background mattered less than your abilities and dedication. It was during this time that I discovered my love for travel. With the money I earned from part-time jobs, I started taking short trips during breaks. At first, it was just to nearby cities, but soon I was venturing further afield, armed with nothing but a backpack and a sense of adventure. Perhaps because I couldn't go out much when I was younger, traveling became my passion. I loved the thrill of stepping into a new place, experiencing cultures I had only read about in books. Unlike expensive package tours, planning my own transportation and accommodations allowed me to experience things I couldn't on a tour. That became the real pleasure of solo travel for me. I could change lodgings based on my mood that day, or even change my destination on a whim. If I had money left over from budgeting during the trip, I could buy a nice souvenir for my mom. Sometimes I'd make friends with other American travelers I met and travel together for a while. For me, who didn't have many friends growing up, university life was really enjoyable. I felt like I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, free from the constant fear and anxiety that had plagued my school days. One summer, after returning from our particularly memorable trip to Europe, I met a girl who came to class carrying a backpack just like mine. Her name was Sarah, and she had just returned from a month-long trip to Thailand, coming straight to class from the airport. "I couldn't miss the first day," she explained with a grin, her eyes bright despite the obvious jet lag. "Besides, I figured someone else might have stories to swap." We hit it off immediately, both being travel enthusiasts. As we compared notes on our recent trips, we found ourselves planning our next adventures together. "Next break isn't that long, so how about somewhere closer, like Canada?" I suggested. Sarah's face lit up. "Sounds good. Let's eat lots of poutine." The more we got to know each other, the more I was drawn to her unpretentious charm. Sarah was unlike anyone I had ever met before. She was kind, adventurous, and had a way of making even the most ordinary days feel special. Interestingly, we discovered that we had both been obsessed with the same series of books about traveling around the world when we were in elementary school. It felt like fate had brought us together. "Remember the chapter about the Amazon rainforest?" Sarah asked one day as we were studying in the library. "I used to dream about exploring it myself one day." I nodded enthusiastically. "Me too. And the one about the Great Wall of China? I promised myself I'd walk it end to end someday." Sarah laughed. "Well, why don't we? Maybe not end to end, but we could visit it together." And just like that, we started planning bigger and more ambitious trips. We traveled with our backpacks during every long break, visiting the places we had dreamed about as children. Each trip brought us closer together, our shared experiences creating a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. Before we knew it, it was time to graduate from university. The thought of parting ways with Sarah was unbearable, so we decided to continue dating after graduation. Job hunting went well for both of us, and we found ourselves navigating the challenges of adult life together. As I settled into my job as a company employee, I found myself thinking more and more about a future with Sarah. A few years after graduation, during a trip to the beach where we had our first kiss, I proposed. "Sarah," I said, my heart pounding as I got down on one knee in the soft sand. You've made these past few years the happiest of my life. Will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. When she finally found her voice, her "yes" was carried away by the ocean breeze, but the joy in her eyes said everything. Now, a few years into our marriage, we're blessed with 2 children and living busy but happy days. My mom was also able to live more comfortably now, just as I had promised her all those years ago. Life isn't perfect, of course. We face challenges and setbacks like any family. But after everything I've been through, I know that together we can overcome anything. Every night as I look at Sarah and our children, I'm filled with a sense of gratitude for how far I've come. But little did I know that my past was about to collide with my present in a way I never could have imagined. 10 years after graduating university, due to certain circumstances, I transferred to a new company. It was an apparel brand with several physical stores, and I was excited about the new opportunity. The company had a good reputation in the industry, and I was looking forward to bringing my experience to a new environment. On my first day, I arrived early, dressed in my best suit. The office was modern and sleek, with open-plan spaces and glass-walled meeting rooms. As I was shown to my desk in the men's brand department, I couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism about this new chapter in my career. That optimism, however, was short-lived. From the moment I met my new manager, Brad Johnson, I knew something was off. He barely looked up from his computer when I was introduced, giving me a cursory nod before turning back to what looked suspiciously like a game of solitaire on his screen. "Welcome aboard," he muttered, not sounding welcoming at all. "Find yourself a desk and try not to bother anyone." I was taken aback by his cold demeanor, but tried not to let it dampen my spirits. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to contributing to the team," I said, forcing a smile. Brad finally looked up to me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Just do your job and we'll get along fine," he said before dismissing me with a wave of his hand. As the days went by, I realized that Brad's attitude wasn't just the first day jitters or a bad mood. The manager's behavior was consistently terrible. He'd sit with his feet up on the desk, surfing the internet on the company PC during work hours. Even when it was time for an important meeting, he wouldn't budge from his seat. One day, about a week into my new job, I noticed everyone preparing for what seemed to be a significant meeting. Notebooks in hand, my colleagues were filing into the main conference room. Brad, however, remained at his desk, seemingly engrossed in an online shopping site. Gathering my courage, I approached his desk. "Mr. Johnson?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The meeting to decide next month's sales target is about to start." Without even glancing up from his screen, Brad replied, "Meeting? I'm busy now. You go instead." I stood there, momentarily stunned. How could the manager skip such an important meeting? "But sir," I pressed, "shouldn't you be there to provide guidance and make final decisions?" Brad finally looked up to me, his eyes cold. "Did I stutter, Thompson? I said you go. Make whatever decisions you think are necessary. Just don't screw it up." With that, he turned back to his computer, effectively dismissing me. I had no choice but to attend the meeting in his place, feeling woefully unprepared and out of my depth. This became a pattern. Brad would regularly skip important meetings based on his mood, leaving me or other team members to pick up the slack. It was frustrating and demoralizing, not just for me, but for the entire team. But Brad's poor work ethic didn't stop at missed meetings. Although lunch break was set at 1 hour, he'd come back nearly 2 hours late every day. The rest of us would be diligently working at our desk while he strolled in, often with shopping bags in hand, acting as if nothing was amiss. One particularly busy afternoon, as we were all scrambling to meet a tight deadline, Brad sauntered in at 2:30 p.m., a full hour and a half late from lunch. "Traffic was hell," he announced to no one in particular, despite the fact that we could all see the multiple shopping bags he was carrying. I couldn't help but exchange glances with my colleague, Sarah, not to be confused with my wife with the same name. She rolled her eyes subtly, her expression a mix of frustration and resignation. It was clear that this behavior was nothing new. But perhaps the most infuriating aspect of Brad's management style was his pettiness when it came to business decisions. It seemed he was more interested in settling personal scores than in doing what was best for the company. One day, I received an email from Store A, one of our flagship locations. They were requesting an additional order of our new collection, which had been selling exceptionally well. Excited by the prospect of increased sales, I immediately went to Brad for approval. "Sir?" I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Store A has sent an additional order for the new collection. May I approve it?" Brad's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing.
Store A? No way. The ordering manager there complained to me the other day. We're not sending any new bestsellers to a store of someone like that.
I was floored. Was he really willing to potentially harm the company's sales over a personal grudge? "But sir," I protested, "Store A's sales are doing well. This could significantly boost our numbers for the quarter."
New items will sell at any store, Brad snapped. Just make up some excuse like we only have enough for other stores and reject it.
I stood there, struggling to comprehend the logic, or lack thereof, behind this decision. How could someone in a management position be so short-sighted? "Sir," I tried again, my voice calm despite my inner turmoil. "I think we should try to fulfill the orders from Store A, our flagship store, as much as possible. We still have enough stock of new items." Brad glared at me, looking me up and down as if seeing me for the first time.
Huh? Mid-career hire employee dares to give me an opinion?
All the employees in the department turned their eyes to us at once. The tension in the air was palpable.
I don't know what kind of company you worked for before, or what position you held,
Brad continued, his voice dripping with disdain.
But in this department, I'm the superior. I'm the manager. Don't interfere with my decisions.
The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues boring into my back as I returned to my desk, my face burning with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. As the days went by, I found it increasingly difficult to work under Brad's management. His unprofessional behavior and poor decision-making were not only affecting the morale of the team, but also potentially harming the company's bottom line. During a coffee break, I found myself alone in the break room with Sarah, the colleague I had exchanged glances with earlier. She looked around cautiously before speaking in a low voice. "Hey, Michael," she said, her eyes darting to the door to ensure we weren't overheard. "I saw what happened with Brad the other day. Are you okay?" I sighed, stirring my coffee absently. "I'm fine, thanks for asking. It's just frustrating, you know? I can't understand how someone in his position can act like that." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "We've all been there. Brad's been like this for years. Nobody can stand up to him because..." She trailed off as another colleague entered the break room. We quickly changed the subject, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Later that week, I overheard a conversation that shed some light on the situation. Two employees from another department were talking in hushed tones by the water cooler.
"Did you hear about the new guy in Brad's department?"
One of them whispered.
"Yeah, I heard he actually stood up to Brad. Can you believe it? Brave guy, or stupid. Doesn't he know who Brad is?" "Apparently not. Someone should warn him before it's too late."
My curiosity piqued. I casually approached them, pretending to refill my water bottle. "Hey guys," I said nonchalantly. "What's the gossip?" They exchanged nervous glances before one of them spoke up.
"Look, Michael, right? You seem like a nice guy, so I'm going to give you some advice. Be careful around Brad."
"Why's that?" I asked, although I had a sinking feeling that I already knew the answer. The other employee leaned in close.
"Brad's not just a manager. He's the only son of our company's executive vice president, Johnson."
I felt my stomach drop. Suddenly, Brad's behavior made a twisted kind of sense.
"He was born when his father was older," the first employee continued, "and the EVP's love for his son is extraordinary. You go against Brad, he immediately reports to the EVP, and your internal evaluation plummets." "We've seen it happen before," the other added grimly. "Good employees promising careers, all gone because they dare to stand up to Brad."
I thanked them for the information, my mind reeling. As I walked back to my desk, I couldn't help but feel a sense of deja vu. Once again, I found myself in a situation where someone's privileged background was being used to bully and intimidate others. The next few weeks were challenging. It seemed that my confrontation with Brad over the Store A order had put me fairly in his crosshairs. I wasn't even included in daily business communications anymore, and when there were sudden schedule changes, I was left out of the loop. One morning, I arrived at work to find my desk had been moved to a corner of the office, far from the rest of the team. When I asked Brad about it, he smirked.
Oh, didn't anyone tell you? We need to make room for the new copier. This was the only space available.
I looked around the office. There was plenty of space near the other desk, and no sign of a new copier. It was clear that this was just another of Brad's petty power plays. The department employees, including the department head, seemed to be his beck and call, and everyone avoided eye contact with me. It was like being back in school, isolated and alone. Brad's attitude towards me started to resemble childish bullying more and more each day. He'd make snide comments about my appearance, my work, and even my background.
Hey, Thompson,
He called out one day as I was heading to a client meeting.
don't you even have a proper suit? Man, mid-career hires are the worst.
I gritted my teeth and kept walking, but I could hear the snickers of the employees who followed Brad's lead. It was clear that they were all too afraid of Brad's influence to stand up for what was right.
If people knew someone like you was handling our men's brand clothes, our sales would plummet.
He'd throw such insults at me whenever we passed each other in the office. It was during these uncomfortable days that the idea of a company trip came up in our department. Apparently, every year, several departments in the company were allocated expenses for team building activities, and this year, it was our department's turn. One afternoon, as I was working on a report, Brad's voice cut through the office noise.
Hey, Thompson, come here.
Warily, I approached his desk. Yes, sir?
You're in charge of arranging this year's company trip.
He said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. I blinked in surprise. This was the first time I heard of any company trip. Me, sir?
Yeah, you like traveling, don't you?
There was something in his tone that made me uneasy. Well, yes. I used to go to various places when I was younger, I admitted cautiously. Brad's smirk widened.
Then you should be able to plan the most enjoyable trip within the budget. I'm counting on you.
I was taken aback by Brad's sudden change in attitude. It was quite unusual for him to say he was counting on me, when he usually treated me like an enemy. Despite my reservations, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of excitement. A company trip, huh? Recently, with everyone in the family busy with their own lives, we hadn't been able to go on trips. Maybe this was an opportunity to not only plan something enjoyable for the team, but also to improve my standing in the department. I'll do my best, sir, I said, trying to keep the enthusiasm out of my voice. As I walked back to my desk, my mind was already whirring with possibilities. Maybe I could plan a trip that would help everyone relax from their daily stress. Something that could bring the team together. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped that this might be an opportunity to close the distance between me and the people in the department. That evening, I stayed late at the office, poring over travel magazines and websites. I wanted to create an itinerary that would appeal to everyone, regardless of age or interest. After hours of research, I set my sights on a hot spring resort in the neighboring state. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the planning. I made reservations for the express train and the inn, created a list of fun activities, and even prepared a detailed schedule that allowed for both group activities and personal time. When I finally presented my plan to Brad, I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. To my surprise, Brad looked over the itinerary and nodded.
Not bad at all,
he said, and for once, there was no sarcasm in his voice. Encouraged by his response, I expanded on the details. I've arranged for us to take the express train, which offers beautiful views of the mountains. We'll visit some interesting tourist spots before arriving at the inn. The hot springs are supposed to be excellent for relaxation, and I planned a group dinner in the banquet hall. Brad listened, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he actually smiled.
Good work, Thompson. This looks promising.
I couldn't believe it. Was this finally a breakthrough? Had I managed to impress Brad? As word of the trip spread through the department, I received compliments from my colleagues. Even those who usually avoided eye contact with me looked at my travel plan and said things like, "As expected of you," and "I'm looking forward to it now." For the first time since joining the company, I felt a sense of belonging. People were smiling at me in the hallways, asking me questions about the trip, sharing their excitement. It was as if the cloud that had been hanging over me since I started working here was finally beginning to lift. The days leading up to the trip were filled with anticipation. I overheard my colleagues discussing what to pack, sharing tips about the area we were visiting, and generally seeming excited about the break from routine. Even Brad's attitude seemed to have softened somewhat. He wasn't exactly friendly, the snide comments and deliberate exclusion had decreased. I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this trip could be a turning point. The night before the trip, I double-checked all the reservations and finalized the last details. As I set my alarm for an early start, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Tomorrow was going to be a big day, and I was determined to make it a success. Little did I know that the next day would change everything, in ways I could never have anticipated. The morning of the company trip dawned bright and clear. I woke up before my alarm, too excited to sleep any longer. As I got ready, I ran through the itinerary in my head one last time, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. "You're up early," my wife Sarah mumbled sleepily from the bed. I smiled as I adjusted my tie in the mirror. "Big day today. Want to make sure everything goes smoothly." Sarah sat up, rubbing her eyes. "You worked so hard on this trip. I'm sure it'll be great." I leaned down to kiss her goodbye. "Thanks, honey. I'll call you when we get to the resort." For springing my step, I left the house and headed to the station. The meeting time wasn't for another hour, but I wanted to be there early to make sure everything was set up properly. As I arrived at the station, the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the nearly empty platform. I found a bench and sat down, my excitement building as I watched the station slowly come to life around me. 30 minutes before the meeting time, I stood up and started pacing, keeping an eye out for my colleagues. I imagined them arriving in groups, chatting excitedly about the day ahead. I rehearsed my welcome speech in my head, wanting to start the trip off on the right foot. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The meeting time came and went. There was still no sign of anyone from the department. I checked my watch, then double-checked the date and time on my phone. No, I hadn't made a mistake. This was definitely the right time and place. As the minutes ticked by, my excitement slowly turned to confusion, then to worry. Where was everyone? Had there been a last-minute change that I wasn't informed about? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my emails and messages, looking for any communication I might have missed. Nothing. I even checked the spam folder, but there were no messages about the trip. Just as I was about to call Brad to ask what was going on, my phone rang. The screen displayed Brad's name, and I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as I answered. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep the worry out of my voice.
"Hey, Thompson, did you make it to the meeting place?"
Brad's voice came through, sounding oddly cheerful. "Yes, I did," I replied, looking around the still empty platform. "Where are you, sir? The meeting time has already passed." There was a lot of noise in the background on Brad's end. It sounded like he was somewhere crowded, with multiple voices and laughter in the background.
"I'm on a company trip with the rest of the department right now,"
Brad said, his voice filled with a smug satisfaction that made my blood run cold. "What do you mean?" I couldn't help but ask, even as a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Brad's laughter cut through me like a knife.
"Who'd want to go on a crappy trip planned by a mid-career hire? You're the only one who'd go."
I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, as the full weight of what was happening crashed down on me. All the work I put into planning this trip, all the hope I had for building better relationships with my colleagues, it had all been for nothing. Worse than nothing, it had been a setup.
"We're not going,"
Brad continued, his voice dripping with malice.
"So it's going to cause trouble for the inn and other places you booked, right? It'll be a huge embarrassment for the company. Take responsibility and make sure you pay all the cancellation fees yourself."
I could almost see the grin on Brad's face as he delivered his coup de grace.
"Well, if you get on your knees and beg, we might consider going with you. Come on, switch to video call. We all want to see you grovel."
As Brad's laughter, joined by what sounded like the entire department, echoed through the phone, something inside me snapped. Years of bullying, of being pushed around, trying to fit in and do the right thing. It all came rushing back. But this time, instead of feeling helpless, I felt a cold, clear anger settle over me. In that moment, I made a decision. Enough was enough. I would end this once and for all. With a calmness that surprised even me, I coldly declared, "I won't be getting on my knees. And you don't need to come here. You're all fired." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Brad's confused voice,
"Huh?"
But I had already ended the call. As I lowered the phone, I noticed my hand was shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. I took a deep breath, looked around the empty station one last time, and then turned to leave. I had some calls to make, and it was time to set things right. As I walked away from the station, my phone buzzed with incoming messages. I ignored them all. There would be a time to deal with the fallout later. For now, I had a plan to put into motion. First, I called the inn and the other places I had made reservations for the trip. I explained that there had been a change of plans and asked about the cancellation policies. To my relief, most of them were understanding and either waived or reduced the cancellation fees due to the short notice. Next, I called my father-in-law, Robert Thompson, the CEO of the company. I had never used my connection to him before, always wanted to make my own way. But now, it was time to let him know what had been happening in his company. Robert, it's Michael. We need to talk about the men's brand department. Over the next hour, I detailed everything that had been happening. Brad's mismanagement, the bullying, the wasted resources, and finally, the cruel prank with the company trip. Robert listened in silence, only occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Robert spoke, voice tight with controlled anger.
Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Michael. I assure you, this will be dealt with immediately.
True to his word, Robert acted swiftly. By the end of the day, official dismissal notices were sent to all employees in the department. The name in the notifier column was Robert Thompson, CEO. I couldn't help but feel grim satisfaction as I imagined the shock in their faces when they received the notices. With such a common surname, none of the employees seemed to have made the connection between me and the CEO. A few days later, I received a call from Brad. His voice, once so smug and condescending, now trembled with a mixture of anger and fear.
You bastard! He sputtered. Do you know who my father is? He's the executive vice president of this company.
I almost laughed at the irony. How many times had Brad used his father's position to intimidate others? But now, that same position was worthless. Mr. Johnson, I replied calmly. Regarding your case, we have reports of misconduct beyond just workplace harassment. You've been inflating expense reports and pocketing the difference, haven't you? We also have evidence that you've been using company funds for personal trips and entertainment. I could almost hear Brad's face turning pale on the other end of the line.
What?
Therefore, in your case, it's not just a dismissal, but a dismissal for cause.
I'll tell my dad about this,
Brad shouted before hanging up. And it seemed he really did complain to his father, the EVP. Not long after, I received a direct call from the EVP on my smartphone.
Is this Mr. Thompson?
The EVP's voice was gruff and authoritative. Yes, that's me, I replied, keeping my voice neutral.
I heard from my son. Despite being a recent mid-career hire, you've been giving my son unsolicited advice and disrupting the teamwork in the department.
I couldn't help but sigh the distorted version of events Brad had clearly fed his father. I merely pointed out issues with the manager's work conduct, I explained patiently. It was your son who disrupted the teamwork and caused losses to the company.
That's impossible,
the EVP blustered.
And I hear you've issued a dismissal for cause to my son. Do you think you can get away with this?
The EVP was shouting so loudly, I had to hold the phone away from my ear.
Do you know who I am? I'm the executive vice president of this company. Apologize to my son on your knees right now and retract the dismissal.
I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Well, I can't do that, I replied firmly. Besides, the dismissal notice was issued by the CEO.
What? The CEO?
The EVP's voice faltered for a moment before regaining its bluster.
I don't care who issued it. I want it retracted immediately.
I'm sorry, but that's not possible, I said, my patience wearing thin. The decision is final.
You'll regret this.
The EVP snarled before abruptly ending the call. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I knew this wasn't over yet, but I was prepared for whatever came next. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I heard that the EVP had stormed into the CEO's office, demanding an explanation. My father-in-law, Robert, later recounted the confrontation to me.
Thompson!
The EVP had bellowed as he burst into Robert's office.
What's the meaning of this? Why has my son been dismissed?
Robert, ever the picture of calm, had simply gestured for the EVP to take a seat.
Johnson, we need to talk about your son's conduct in this company.
My son's conduct?
He's been nothing but exemplary. This is all a misunderstanding.
Robert shook his head.
I'm afraid it's not. We have substantial evidence of your son's misconduct, including financial irregularities and workplace harassment.
The EVP's face had turned an alarming shade of red.
Nonsense! My son had his reasons for doing what he did. He was just trying to maintain discipline in his department. Discipline?
Robert's voice had taken on a steely edge.
Is that what you call bullying employees, misusing company funds, and deliberately sabotaging company events?
For a moment, the EVP seemed at a loss for words. Then his eyes narrowed.
Who are you going to trust? A mid-career hire? Or me who has worked with you for years?
Robert leaned forward, his gaze unwavering.
I trust the evidence, Johnson. And the evidence clearly shows that your son has been abusing his position and harming this company. But what about my son's future?
The EVP spluttered.
What's he going to do now? Perhaps,
Robert suggested quietly.
This will be an opportunity for him to learn about responsibility and consequences. Something he should have learned long ago.
The EVP's face turned pale as the reality of the situation finally seemed to sink in.
You can't do this,
he whispered, his earlier bravado evaporating.
I've given years to this company. You owe me.
Robert shook his head.
The company doesn't owe you the right to abuse your position, or to cover for your son's misdeeds. In fact, you'll be facing disciplinary action yourself for failing to address your son's misconduct, and for attempting to interfere with company decisions.
The EVP left Robert's office a broken man, his face ashen and his shoulders slumped. In the days that followed, the company underwent a significant shakeup. Brad was dismissed for cause, his misconduct thoroughly documented and presented to the board. The EVP, once so powerful and intimidating, was demoted to a position in a subsidiary company, stripped of his influence and authority. As for me, I found myself in a peculiar position. Employees who remained in the department looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. The story of what had happened spread quickly through the company grapevine, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. One morning, as I was getting coffee in the break room, I overheard two employees whispering.
Did you hear? Thompson is actually the CEO's son-in-law. No way! I heard he single-handedly took down Brad and the EVP. I always knew there was something different about him. Remember how he stood up to Brad that time?
I cleared my throat, and they jumped, looking at me with wide eyes. Good morning, I said calmly, pretending I hadn't heard the conversation.
Good morning, Mr. Thompson.
They stammered before hurrying out of the break room. I couldn't help but shake my head and smile. The rumors were getting out of hand, but I suppose it was better than the cold shoulders and sneers I used to receive. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Robert to restructure the department. We implemented new policies to prevent the kind of abuses that occurred under Brad's leadership, and we made sure to promote a culture of respect and professionalism. One day, as we were reviewing the changes, Robert looked at me with a mixture of pride and sadness.
You know, Michael, I can't help but feel partially responsible for what had happened. I should have been more aware of what was going on in my own company.
I shook my head. You couldn't have known, Robert. Brad and his father were very good at hiding their misdeeds.
Perhaps,
Robert sighed.
But it's a reminder that we always need to be vigilant. Power can corrupt even the best of us if we're not careful.
His words struck a chord with me. I thought back to my own journey, from the bully kid in school to the position I now found myself in. I realized that I had a responsibility not just to do my job well, but to ensure that what happened to me never happened to anyone else in this company. You're right, I said, and that's why we need to make sure these changes stick. We need to create a culture where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their position or background. Robert nodded, a small smile playing on his lips.
You know, Michael, when my daughter first introduced you, I knew you were special. But I never imagined you ended up being exactly what this company needed.
I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. For so long, I had tried to distance myself from my connection to Robert, wanting to prove myself on my own merits. But now, I realized that we could work together to make real positive changes. As the weeks turned into months, the atmosphere in the company began to shift. The fear and tension that had permeated the office under Brad's reign began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. One Friday afternoon, as I was packing up to leave for the weekend, Sarah from my department knocked on my office door. Mr. Thompson, do you have a moment? Of course, Sarah, come in, I said, gesturing to the chair in front of my desk. She sat down, fidgeting nervously with the hem of her blazer. I wanted to apologize, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Apologize? For what? I asked, genuinely confused. For not standing up for you when he was being so awful to you, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. We were all so afraid of losing our jobs, of facing Brad's wrath, that we just stood by and let it happen. I'm so sorry. I was touched by her sincerity. Sarah, you don't need to apologize. I understand how difficult the situation was for everyone. She shook her head. No, we should have done something, but I want you to know that what you did, standing up to Brad and the EVP, it inspired a lot of us. It showed us that it's possible to fight against injustice, even when it seems hopeless. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment that I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. Thank you, Sarah. It means a lot to me. As Sarah left my office, I sat back in my chair reflecting on everything that had happened. From the bully kid in school, to the underappreciated employee, to now being in a position where I can make a real difference. It had been quite a journey. I thought about Brad, wondering where he was now, and if he had learned anything from his experience. Part of me hoped that this would be a wake-up call for him, a chance to reassess his life and become a better person. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the sting of his cruel words and actions, felt the grim satisfaction knowing that he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. As for the EVP, I had heard through the grapevine that he was struggling to adjust to his new, less prestigious position. It was a harsh lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. Power and position should be earned through hard work and integrity, not inherited or abused. Looking out of my office window at the bustling city below, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing a company's culture never is. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely excited about the future. I picked up my phone and dialed my wife's number. Hey Sarah, I said when she answered. How about we take that trip this weekend? Just the two of us. As I listened to her excited chatter about possible destinations, I couldn't help but smile. Life had thrown me many curveballs, but I had come out stronger for it. And now, with the love of my family and the opportunity to make a real difference in my work, I felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The company trip that never happened had turned out to be a catalyst for real change. Not just in the company, but in my life. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst experiences can lead to the best outcomes, if we have the courage to stand up for what's right. As I left the office that evening, I took one last look around. The department that had once been a source of stress and anxiety now felt like a place of possibility and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And I was ready for them all. A year had passed since the infamous company trip incident. The changes we had implemented in the company were starting to bear fruit. Employee satisfaction was up, productivity had increased, and we were even seeing a positive impact on our bottom line. One sunny afternoon, I found myself sitting in the same park where I used to escape during my lunch breaks in those early difficult days at the company. This time, I wasn't here to hide or lick my wounds. I was here to reflect on how far we'd come. As I sat on a bench watching people go about their day, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from HR, the results of our latest employee satisfaction survey. With a mix of anticipation and nervousness, I opened it. The results were overwhelmingly positive. Comments like, "I feel valued here," and "This is the best work environment I've ever been in," filled the screen. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of pride in what we had accomplished. But one comment, in particular, caught my eye. A year ago, I was ready to quit. The toxic environment was affecting my health and my personal life, but the changes that had been implemented since then have transformed this company. For the first time in years, I look forward to coming to work. Thank you for listening to us and having the courage to make these changes. I felt a lump form in my throat as I read those words. It was a poignant reminder of why we had fought so hard to change things. As I was lost in thought, a familiar voice pulled me back to the present.
Mind if I join you?
I looked up to see Robert, my father-in-law and the CEO, standing there with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. Of course not, I said, gesturing to the empty space beside me. What brings you out here? Robert handed me one of the coffees and sat down.
Same as you, I suspect. Taking a moment to appreciate how far we've come.
We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, sipping our coffee and watching the world go by.
You know,
Robert finally said,
when I first started this company, I had such big dreams. Not just about success and profits, but about creating a place where people would be happy to work. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that.
I nodded, understanding all too well how easy it was to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
But you
Robert continued, turning to look at me.
reminded me of what's truly important. You had the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it would have been easier to stay quiet.
I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. I just did what I thought was right, he said softly. Robert chuckled.
And that's exactly why you're the right person to lead this company into the future.
I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Robert's eyes twinkled with amusement at my reaction.
You heard me. I'm not getting any younger, Michael. It's time to start thinking about the future of the company. And I can't think of anyone better suited to take over when the time comes.
I was speechless. Me? As CEO? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. But what about your son? I asked, knowing that Robert had a son who worked in another branch of the company. Robert shook his head.
James is happy where he is. He has no interest in taking over the company. But you, Michael, you have the vision, the integrity, and the leadership skills to take this company to new heights.
As the implication of what Robert was saying sank in, I felt a mixture of emotions wash over me. Pride, excitement, fear, determination. They all swirled together in a dizzying cocktail. I don't know what to say, I finally managed. Robert patted my shoulder.
You don't have to say anything right now. This isn't a decision to be made lightly. Take some time to think about it. Talk it over with Sarah. Know that when you're ready, the opportunity is there.
As we sat there in the park, the future stretching out before us full of possibilities, I couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns my life had taken. From a bullied kid to a frustrated employee, potentially the future CEO of a company. It was more than I could ever have imagined. But one thing was clear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head on. The lessons I had learned, the support of my family, and the trust of people like Robert, I felt equipped to make a real difference, not just in the company, but in the lives of everyone who worked there. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what the future held, I would never forget where I came from. I would use my experiences, both good and bad, to create a workplace where everyone felt valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential. The company trip that never happened had set me on an unexpected journey. But as I sat there in the fading light, I realized that the real trip, the journey of growth, change, and self-discovery, was only just beginning. And I was ready for every step of it.